Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carla Farley, the president of the Greater San Diego Association of Realtors. Through this program today, well, actually, let me just say welcome, because you see the agenda up there. We got a lot packed in here. But through this program today, we'll be discussing an important issue, and I want to say that will determine the future of our coastal communities. And that's a will, not a maybe, just by happenstance, but a definite will. The decisions of our policymakers that they're considering today will determine whether and to what extent homes, businesses, and infrastructure will remain in place along the coast. So this is a big deal, a really big deal. And that's why we are glad that you are joining us today. For our attendees today, especially our realtors on the program, our objective is to make certain that you are informed, ready to engage, and be prepared to serve as a resource to your clients and the community at large. At issue with the Coastal Commission, they are calling for the local municipalities to update what they call their local coastal programs. And so you'll hear it referred throughout this session as LCPs. And in that, they want them to account for sea level rise, meaning that they want them to plan typically between 5 to 6 feet of sea level rise. What happens in that case? In that, the controversial policy that the Coastal Commission is recommending includes what we call managed retreat. And you'll hear that a lot throughout here. A coastal management policy it is that calls for the removal, and I said removal, or relocation of coastal structures, and that includes homes, and moving them away inland from the rising tide. Go figure, right? This is one of the reasons that SDAR helped, along with some other contributing associations, to launch Smart Coast California, which is a 501c6 organization. And it's made up of local realtor associations throughout California. They serve as an important resource to coastal communities, and we advocate for balanced coastal management policies. Realizing what was happening and the extent of this issue and just how far it was overreaching, we pulled together some resources. We hired a consultant, got some support from NAR, yay, NAR. And that was so that we could monitor this situation and respond where we would need to. So today, I'll tell you, I am really, really proud of the work that Smart Coast California has done, as well as also being honored to serve as the 2021 president of Smart Coast California. With that being said, those resources that I talked about, we got a great lineup for you today. We have Don Schmidt, who will be on with us today. He is our consultant at Smart Coast California. So we got a lot of power behind us because he has more than 28 years of planning and experience. He was a principal planner with the Coastal Commission, so that always helps to know who you're talking to, right? He'll talk about the sea level rise policies, the programs, and he's going to talk about Smart Coast in itself. We also are very, very honored to have the Honorable Mayor, Harry Gasterlin from the city of Del Mar. And if you haven't heard their story, well, hold on, because you'll hear it and it'll be wonderful. She was elected to City Council in 2018, and she is chair of Sea Level Rise Advisory Committee. So that always helps, right? And of course, they're right there on the coast. So she's definitely ingrained in this, and you'll see just about how much. She's going to talk about the local coastal program. I'm not used to saying it all out because we just say LCP. So that's what you're probably going to hear most of the time. And then she'll talk about some perspectives of the policymakers as well. In addition to that, I'll give another big yay because I like to see when my realtor organizations come out. We have Yeli Garvik from the California Association of Realtors. And that tells you the support that we're getting. She deals with water resource planning, seismic engineering, all that good stuff. And so we'll be glad to get a state legislative update from Yeli on what's happening when it comes to sea level rise as well. With that being said, I'm going to go dive right into it and let us get to Don Schmidt, our consultant for Smart Coast California, with an update. You there, Don?
I am. Got me?
Yes.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'm going to, first of all, thank you very much for the introduction, Carl, and thanks for all that you've done for Smart Coast California in your leadership role. I'm going to apologize to everybody beforehand. I've got 1,100 miles of coastline to cover here. This deals with all sorts of legal issues, planning issues, constitutional issues, billions of dollars of real estate. There's a lot of ground to cover and still be informative. But we're gonna give it our best shot and do this in about 25 minutes. So are you seeing my screen? Is this working?
Yes.
Okay, so I just want to start off also by saying I'm very excited to make this presentation for the Greater San Diego Association of Realtors, because San Diego's had a leadership role going back a long ways, head and shoulders ahead of a lot of the state of California with its Regional Climate Collaborative in 2011 and SANDAG's shoreline monitoring programs and the work done by the Port of San Diego and the San Diego Coastal Exchange. You've had your eye on the ball in San Diego, but we've got a lot of work to do because candidly things are not going real well to address this specific issue. So local coastal programs, the only time I'm going to say it out entirely, we abbreviate everything in this business. LCPs, think about a general plan for communities along the coastline. And they're a good thing. They give the local jurisdictions, vest in them the legal authority to issue their own coastal development permits. So in most cases, you don't have to go to the Coastal Commission anymore. And one of the things that's been happening is the update of these LCPs is to address sea level rise. And the first step on all that is vulnerability assessments. And so under grants from the state and local funds, we've been mapping out what areas will be inundated in these communities unless certain actions are taken with certain amounts of sea level rise, which I'll talk about in a moment. So this is Mission Bay with 6 feet of sea level rise, which a lot of the models or some of the models indicate is where we will be by the end of the century. You can see a lot of these neighborhoods, a lot of these important areas are going to be underwater by the mapping that they're doing. This is Carlsbad. This is the bluff hazard zone that you're seeing here with, again, 6 feet of sea level rise. And these are the areas that they expect the bluffs to retreat back to. This is another section of Del Mar here. And again, with apologies, I'm moving quickly, but the PowerPoint will be available for attendees. This is La Jolla, and you can see the coastal flooding that they have here. The bluff retreat that they showed in La Jolla is very, very dramatic. You can see that essentially all these homes that we've highlighted down below, this is with 5.7 feet of sea level rise. These houses would be considered, if a managed retreat proceeds as the Coastal Commission wants, to be disposable, dispensable. These cannot be saved. This is a vulnerability assessment, which is currently ongoing for Coronado. You have inundation or without a storm in the blue, and with flooding, like a 100-year storm with rising sea level areas. These are the portions of Coronado that they would anticipate would be underwater. Now, the sea level rise science, you very often hear in any political debate in America now, just follow the science, but the science is very, very controversial. And so the low range to the high range, as you can see on this table for the lower part of California, the projections by 2100 are 3.1 feet to a high range of 5.5, 1.5 to 5.5. But this is not the numbers which are being used by the Coastal Commission on their projections. They're using the medium high risk aversion by the end of the century, and they're requiring 7 feet of sea level rise in the San Diego area by the end of the century. And they make it sound like they're being very conservative in regards to that, but you'll see the probability that they have at the top of this table is a 0.5% probability that the sea level rise will be this great. That's 1 in a 200% chance. And that has some pretty dramatic implications in what policies are adopted. And these are associated probabilities with high emissions, low emissions, and everything else that we're talking about here. So Smart Coast California, the board has been busy adopting specific policies, which I want to briefly go over with the attendees today. What we think would be, every pun intended, smart policies that the state should adopt in the updating of the local coastal programs, the LCPs. First is existing development. And this is one which is causing a lot of angst out there. And that in our mind, existing development means just that, it's existing. The Coastal Commission wants to use a definition that only houses and businesses that were in existence in January 1st, 1977 qualify for existing development. And that's hugely important because Section 30235 of the Coastal Act only allows shoreline protection devices to be developed, maintained, and expanded for existing development. If it's not an existing development, it's a new development, and therefore you are not legally entitled to have a shoreline protection device. So Del Mar, and I think we got somebody here on our panel, do we not, who's probably going to have a couple things to say about Del Mar. They went forward with their local coastal program amendment, and they, like other cities, wanted to define existing development as any existing legally established structure. The Coastal Commission wanted to redefine existing development as being January 1st, 1977. Del Mar withdrew their local coastal program. Because of that, they saw the writing on the wall and they just decided that they were not going to proceed with that. And after all that effort, that LCP still has not been certified by the Coastal Commission or by the city. The next hugely important policy that's been adopted by the Smart Coast Board is manage or treat. And SCC believes that manage or treat is appropriate in some places and other places not. What is manage or treat? It's a very commonsensical approach that when a structure gets dilapidated or it has exceeded its useful life and you demolish it, you rebuild further inland so that it will not be threatened by projected sea level rise. Makes perfect sense to everybody. And yes, there's places where manage or treat makes sense, especially in the rural areas of the state of California where there's a lot of room to retreat to. But manage or treat is not feasible in many of our coastal communities. You can see this is Solana Beach and this is Oceanside. And this shows the cliff retreat and wave uprush by 2100 pursuant to the vulnerability assessments that have been done by the Coastal Commission. And you can see that these properties literally have no place to retreat to. They have the ocean on one side, they have the streets at their back. What are they going to do? SCC also believes that we should have a tiered response in regards to how we implement certain things. It should not be a one-size-fits-all for a couple of good reasons. One, these projections are just that, they're projections. We don't know if we're going to get that level of sea level rise going forward in the future. And so there ought to be options in regards to this. There should be softer measures which are taken, like dune restoration, living shorelines. And this, by the way, is in lieu of manage or treat, not implementing manage or treat, but what about these critical communities that have no place to retreat to? So first you should try dune restoration, living shorelines, then kelp forestation, beach sand nourishment protected by artificial reefs. And then ultimately, if there is no option and we're gonna lose whole broad swaths of our communities, yes, shoreline protection devices, seawalls, revetments. Kelp forestation is, I'll just move quickly on this, and there's many successful programs where you basically expand the kelp forest, and it does break some of the energy of the wave attack. Beach nourishment is self-explanatory. We're all familiar with it. It's where you import sand and you put it on the beach, which is great, except if you have an erosive beach, it doesn't work. Sandag put 320,000 cubic yards of nourished beach wash away in Torrey Pines a number of years ago. It was in 24 hours. It was very dramatic. So in situations where beach nourishment is no longer working because of storm wave attack and because of perhaps sea level rise, then the science is coming in pretty strong that if you build offshore reefs, you can break the back of the waves permanently, and that beach nourishment will survive. This is a study for a artificial reef that was done on the Grand Dominicus, and they did reef balls off there, and they gained 13 meters in the shoreline just pursuant to natural processes. It doesn't just protect the development, the communities on the beach. It protects the beach itself, which, by the way, the realtor community and all the elected officials all care very much about the beach themselves. We want to see that as well. So if you were to do something like this in Del Mar, for instance, you could protect 1 mile of beach with an artificial reef for $10 to $12 million. And then you could do the beach nourishment, which has already been done in San Diego County many times. I think this number is highly inflated based upon sand costs. But the important thing is that the beach sand would stay there and the reef would protect it. So you would have the beach, you would protect the community, you would protect the environment. It's a win-win. In section 30235 of the Coastal Act, as I mentioned before, does allow revetments, breakwaters, seawalls, cliff retaining walls, etc., to be permitted to protect existing structures. That's hugely important. And so at the end of the day, if in fact it is the only way to protect our communities and there's no place for them to do managed retreat and these other softer protection steps don't work, then yes, seawalls and rock revetments should be allowed and they should be maintained to protect our communities. And this is being increasingly reflected, much to the chagrin of the Coastal Commission and its staff, by a number of our coastal cities. This is Oceanside's working on their LCPA, and here's a statement here that was prepared for them. While it remains somewhat unclear as to whether or not the Coastal Commission will support hard armoring, it's clear to me they're not supportive of it. Strategies that might be appropriate for Oceanside, that there's growing support in scientific and academic communities for such strategies. And this is true. There's a lot of precedent for this and it can be done correctly. It doesn't always have to be done in a fashion which is highly injurious to the environment. And we would point out that Oceanside, for instance, one of our cities in the plan area here, has huge sections which are already protected by shoreline protection devices like the rock revetment we see in this photograph here. And this is from the Coastal Hazard Vulnerability Assessment that the City of Oceanside is currently undertaking. The SEC board's also adopted a policy in regards to regulatory takings. What's a regulatory taking? It's from the Fifth Amendment of the federal Constitution. It specifies that private property shall not be taken for public use without just compensation. And if the government institutes regulations which take property, that's called a regulatory taking through the permit process. And it's not permissible and it's compensable. That means that the government that does it has to pay the property owner for taking their land, which is one of the things that really has the attention of the cities and the counties in the state of California. If they accept these regulations of managed retreat that the Coastal Commission wants them to put into their LCP, the cities and the counties could find themselves cutting checks for hundreds of millions, in fact, billions of dollars, and it's just not realistic to expect them to do that. So this is the Fifth Amendment of the federal Constitution, which I already spoke to, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. And our state constitution, Article 1, Section 1 specifies that all people are by nature free and independent and have inalienable rights. That's a very tricky word. It means it cannot be taken away, even if the majority of the people want to take it away. And among these are enjoying and defending life and liberty, acquiring, possessing, and protecting property. That's going to be a very, very tough hurdle for them to get over with managed retreat. And I think Yellow will probably have some comments in regards to some of the legislation that's being passed in Sacramento, because I think the lawmakers get it, even if some folks within the agencies do not. In section 30010, the Coastal Act itself specifies that the Coastal Commission and the local jurisdictions shall not exercise their power to grant or deny a permit in a manner which will take or damage private property for public use without the payment of just compensation therefor. That means they have to pay for these properties if they demand that the property owner has to allow it to fall into the sea pursuant to sea level rise and storm waves. Now, this is increasingly being taken up as the cities study this more, and Morro Bay just got their LCP adopted, and policy C.1.8 states, should the city implement policies which result in the destruction of private property, the city should pay fair market value for the land they are taking by regulation. The Coastal Commission certified the LCP on August 12th. It just got approved. Every city is different in regards to their geography. Some don't have any development close to the ocean. Some have more. We'll talk about the differences if there's time later. Just this week, the county of Santa Barbara's LCP, they had in their 35 through 51D that went on to state economically viable use of the property where full compliance with all LCP policies and standards, including setbacks for coastal hazards, would preclude all reasonable economic use of the property as a whole. The county may allow the minimum economic use and or development of the property necessary to avoid an unconstitutional taking. The Coastal Commission, in their staff report on their suggested modifications, wanted this taken out. And the county of Santa Barbara withdrew the local coastal program amendment. That just happened on Wednesday of this week. Carlsbad is also working on their LCP amendment and their definition of existing development. This is hugely important. Existing is within the context of this policy, refers to structures that existed prior to the Coastal Commission certification of the policy. That means the LCP. That means that they are not accepting that January 1st, 1977 date. And this has been one of the sticking points that has caused not one, not two, but now 3 communities as of this week who spent 4 or 5 years and hundreds of thousands of dollars working on these LCP updates to withdraw. Now we're trying to put the word out. Maybe they shouldn't withdraw. Maybe they should go to the hearing and have their day in court, because the city council and the board of supervisors, whatever it happens to be, doesn't have to accept the suggested modifications. But the coastal commissioners are not hearing our side of the conversation. And I think that the local jurisdictions really need to weigh in a vigorous fashion and start making those arguments and defending their LCPs in front of the commission. By the way, the Carlsbad City Council meeting on this is October 12th, just around the corner. We at SCC, we're looking forward to meeting and working with their planning staff, and we strongly urge everybody who cares about these issues to weigh in with the City Council and make sure that they are protecting private property and that they are protecting their community, and they're not going to be engaging in managed retreat to a degree where it's going to take private property. So the stakeholder involvement is just absolutely vital to adoption of good policies. And the enlightened people that formed SCC, and it's been a lot of work to create this organization. There's some 90,000 people now that are involved with it. Carla's played a huge role in this. Ryan's played a huge role in this. There's a number of people that have just done a tremendous amount of work. I've had a part, but what really is going to matter is when the people that are deeply involved really start to speak to the matters. Because right now, all the Coastal Commission hears from is certain organizations with a vested interest in the other direction. The Surfrider Foundation and the Sierra Club tend to not want anything but managed retreat. The Coastal Act, Section 3004A, specifies that the Coastal Commission, to achieve maximum responsiveness to local conditions, is supposed to rely heavily on the local government and local land use planning procedures and enforcements. And the Coastal Act goes on to say under 30500C that the precise content of each LCP shall be determined by the local government, consistent with the other sections of the Coastal Act. And by the way, there has been a lot of work. The League of Cities and the Association of Counties had interaction and has a working group. They meet monthly with the coastal commissioners. Last year, they adopted a letter which said that they were all going to cooperate on these things. Well, since that letter was adopted, there's been 2 more LCPs of very prominent cities, a city and a county, which has dropped out of the process. They're just going home. And the comments by the executive director, he was just absolutely furious about this. Jack Ainsworth, by the way, is a good man, but he's alarmed by this trend whereupon these local jurisdictions are packing it up in the briefcase because they don't feel like they're going to get a fair day in court and going home. And although some of the commissioners chastised local governments and said that they suspect it's because the local government doesn't want to make the tough decisions, I testified that no, the local cities are not coastal cowards. They're very much aware of the challenges in front of them and are willing to make the tough decisions, but they're not going to be browbeat and pushed into regulations which are unconstitutional and which will require huge swaths of their communities to disappear into the sea. So again, we just want to reemphasize that the stakeholder involvement is critically important. We want to urge everybody that's attending this to be in touch with your local communities, be in touch with San Diego Association of Realtors, be in touch with Smart Coast. We pass out that information. We'll let you know when the hearings are. Your voices matter very, very much. And to use a very overused term in the current day and age, we are all in this together. And this is our communities, it is our coastline, and it should not be a one size fits all, and it should not be something which will not pass constitutional muster. So I want to thank you very much. There's contact information here for the San Diego Association of Realtors, for Smart Coast California, and for my firm. And all three of these organizations stand ready to assist you in any way that we can to address this critical issue. So thank you, and I will pass it back over to Ryan and Carl.
Yeah, thank you, Don. Appreciate it always. That is packed with a ton of information, and we understand that the time is limited. Like you said, we will get this out to the participants here today. It's always good material to refer back to, as well as even going to smartcoastca.org and signing up for updates and things of that nature. Don mentioned chiming in on some of these recommendations when they come up. That's very, very important for people to do it. We say a lot and we collect all the data, but we have to act. And that's become one of the things for Smart Coast California, is that up and down the state, you know, it's one sound, one band. And so we want to make sure that the message is heard. And the more of us who speak on it, literally go speak on it, write on it, whatever it is that you have to do, it gets the attention. The other thing is that I don't know if many people know that the Coastal Commission is not the law. So it works great when you actually know what's happening and know what's in the background. And you'll see that when we talk about Mayor Gasterlin in the city of Del Mar. So Del Mar had theirs come up, of course, in the LCP. It had these recommendations in it for managed retreat, which we, of course, advocate that we need to use some alternative methods, because we do know that each of our coastal communities are very unique in its nature around them. They don't all require the same thing. And you heard Don talk about that. He gave a list of just some of the alternatives that are out there. And so that's one of the things that we ask our policymakers to consider, is just these other viable alternatives that may work, because you just can't pick a house up and just move it like they're saying. But then again, they know that, right? So that's just me. Mayor Gasterlin, of course, for the city of Del Mar, they actually knew that it's just recommendations, not law, and set out to say, what are we going to do for our community? What's best for our community? And they were bold enough. What I call it, I said they took the first shot over the bow, because a lot of people generally do not do that with the Coastal Commission. And so back in 2019, they took the first shot over the bow. And I think we all just stood there and waited like, what? What's happening right now? Is somebody doing this? We love it. And so we just try to figure out, how do we even help support it and get everybody, you know, on. I mean, these are people's properties, their legacies, their homes, all of that. All of them are just not vacation homes. Some people live there year round. And so Mayor Gasterlin, welcome. Thank you for joining us once again. Give us a few minutes and share kind of what happened in your June meeting when you had your recommendations that came up with the Coastal Commission.
Thank you for the question, Carla. And Carla, it's a delight to be here. Thank you for hosting this. And thank you to Carla, Ryan, and Don for inviting me here. Our journey through the sea level rise adaptation planning started 7 years ago. You know, it was my very first meeting in the Del Mar Public Library with about 10 concerned citizens. We met around a table I was late because I thought I was going to be at City Hall and I had to run down the street. Luckily, Del Mar is small. The library was only a few minutes away. And what happened, but Kim Fletcher, whose great-grandfather founded Del Mar, was sitting next to me and turned to me and said, Terry, you're a professor at UCSD. You're part of the Scripps Institution of Oceanography. You used to be chair of the finance committee. You get it. I think you should be chair. So he nominated me and I didn't say no. And that's where this journey started. And I'll be ever grateful to Kim Fletcher. You know, he passed away about a year ago and he was just such an important part of our community. So first, sea level rise is real and climate change is real. We see it around us. I see it at my front door, because when the big storms happen and the surface drainage comes down, the water is now not 1 foot deep, it's 2 foot deep going down my alley. You know, we each see our own personal evidence of what's happening. We each have our own markers of how our world is changing. The plants that don't survive anymore, you need to replace it with something different because the rainfall patterns have changed. You know, a flowering bush isn't getting the right rain at the right moment. I say these examples because we in Del Mar decided we want to watch what's happening in our community and respond in our way to these changing conditions around us. That said, we went through 4 years of listening to the science, thinking it through, and asking how does it apply to our coastline, our beaches, the river, the wetlands, the bluffs, and our drainage and our groundwater. All of these together comprise the impacts of sea level rise. So we put together an adaptation plan. We adopted it into our general plan, and that's all that the state law requires. That's all that the law requires. What our grant required was that we submit a local coastal program amendment, and now I'll call it an LCPA, to the Coastal Commission. So we submitted it reluctantly on the part of many. And when we submitted it, it specifically precluded managed retreat as being not appropriate in Del Mar. And I can go into that in a little bit. Why is it not appropriate in Del Mar? And said, here, Coastal Commission, here's our starting point. Let's start this discussion. And I want to refer to something very important that Don said. And that's the definition of existing structures. Our adaptation plan was clear that our definition of existing structure in Del Mar, given that we have a local coastal program that allows, and it's certified, sea level walls to protect our beachfront properties. We can build them. And in fact, the blufftop properties can build what's needed as well. So our definition is structures that can be built according to our zoning code in place in 1997 when the Coastal Act went into place. And that's really important because there was a lot that wasn't built back then. And the Coastal Commission wants the definition to be structures that had already been built back then. So that started the debate. It culminated in our withdrawing in June because we could not come to terms. We tried and we tried. And at the very last minute, a few days before the hearing, the Coastal Commission gave us another list of comments and remarks and recommendations. And if the Coastal Commissioners had passed that local coastal program amendment with all these staff changes, that would have meant that it would have been conditionally certified. We didn't even want a conditionally certified LCP that had managed retreat in it. So we withdrew. It was a tough thing to do. It was 6.5 years of my life, but I consider it just the beginning of the next phase of the conversation. So thank you, Carla, for the question.
Yeah, that was good. So, you know, we've been involved in some other cities and their processes and things like that. We've clearly been able to see that the Coastal Commission, their policies just fail. They don't take into account of the unique character And you talked about a little bit of that. I want you to kind of elaborate on why managed retreat doesn't work for the city of Del Mar.
Sure. Del Mar has 1/3, fully a third of all its households at the beach level. So that means between the San Dieguito River and what we call Powerhouse Park, and then from the shoreline inland to where the inland bluffs start to get high, basically up to Highway 101 and then further east to Jimmy Durante Boulevard. It's about a square mile, but it's got 600 homes packed into it. And most of those homes are behind and below the front layer of homes that's along the beach. The front homes along the beach, in fact, are built on a residual bluff. You know, they're elevated about 6 to 8 feet above sea level, and then it goes down behind them. If those homes go away, we lose 1/3 of our city. It's a huge amount of property value.
Wow.
If they're roads, it's Highway 101. We would be cut off.
You said 1/3 of the city.
Yes,
Wow.
yes. And what we also realized was, hey, we're allowed to have those seawalls. It's in our certified LCP. You know, we're not recertifying to allow those seawalls to now be challenged. No.
Right.
And the other side of it was our local coastal program amendment, our adaptation plan that we did add as an appendix to our general plan. It's in there. And it's in our ordinances. We rezoned to make sure that we can implement these things. They have other protections, and there are 2 very important other protections for this community in particular. That's designing and constructing what's called a living levee or a dune along the riverbanks. We're going to need to do that together with the fairgrounds, which is in Del Mar, but has its own separate zoning. So we need to make sure that the waters, when they happen, inundation is channeled out toward the ocean. We need to make sure that our front lane seawalls are there as well. So that creates effectively a dike effect. You know, Holland does this very, very well, and that protects those homes. The other thing that protects these homes is wetland migration, making sure that the floodplain land that's adjacent to the lagoon, which is zoned very low density, it's 1 house per acre, 14-foot height, that remains that way. So that as the wetlands need to migrate, they have space to be. You know, we can continue to protect those structures that are allowed per the current code and protect our wetlands, which act like a sponge for some of this water.
Wow. Wow. Well, we know that they also had some provisions in there that wanted to include disclosure kind of language. You know, what does that do for property values when you have to start having disclosures? I think all the realtors on here know.
Yeah, well, this is where I'll put my scientist hat on for a moment. It's so important to understand the difference between how FEMA defines risk of flooding and flood zone and floodplain, and how frequently a storm is going to come along that will cause that flooding. These are clear, and we've lived with this for a long, long time. It's well understood. Those disclosures, we get it, we understand. Sea level rise models, and Don, I was so glad that you had that one slide in there. The lower end of the sea level rise, at the top in your header of that slide, it said, the risk of sea level rise higher than this amount, and this was the low end, is 17%. And if I remember correctly, I was reading really quick, the medium risk in that slide was either 5% or 0.05% for higher than the medium. These are tiny probabilities of exceeding these predicted values. Well, I've just given a lot of statistics. We all look at the weather map when there's a hurricane coming, and we listen to the news and we see this cone of uncertainty. Where will the hurricane land? You have the hurricane, and then it gets broader and broader and broader, and finally it's covering from Texas to Florida. And we don't know if it's even going to cross the panhandle of Florida.
Right.
That's the cone of uncertainty. And that's where we are with sea level rise prediction.
Wow.
So I am a strong advocate that what we need to do is disclose that, hey, here's our FEMA flooding. Here's our risk of 1 in 100 year flooding. We've just seen the 1 in 100 year of hitting New Jersey and New York. And we are planning ahead and protecting against the rising seas. And most importantly, here's the third part of the disclosure. We are watching it and measuring so that we will know it early enough in advance. And this is in our adaptation plan. How far in advance do we need to notice a change so that we can plan for it? You know, if it takes 15 years to help the wetlands migrate, then let's watch the wetlands rising and then get ready so that 15 years from now, the sponge will be there. And during that time, we study how to do it and how to do it well so that it protects our existing structures by whatever definition we have.
Yeah. You know what? I am so glad that you mentioned that whole interval and the time span that they're really talking about, because I think when a lot of people hear it, they think like there's just this big tsunami getting ready to come right now. Right now, and everybody, you got to move the homes, you got to do, you know, what have you, and they don't know the timeline that you're really talking about. So I do think part of those disclosures that you talked about, the greater part is letting them know that you are watching it and measuring and taking precautions. Like it's just not going unnoticed at all or not checked. There are, I'm sure, a lot of realtors on this call who probably are their first time even hearing about sea level rise, but I'll tell you, this is in the whole climate change. And so for those of you who don't work the coast and probably say, oh, I don't work the coast, it has nothing to do with me, wrong. In real estate, everything is policy and legislation. And you know, when you put that crack in the door, so if you let one thing happen, there'll be the rest of it that comes behind it. And so it may not be the coastline today for you, but it will affect you in the nature of climate change itself. So for those who are just hearing about sea level rise for the first time, is there any kind of advice or tips you can give them on, you know, what to look for, what to do, or how do they even get involved?
Good. Well, I think it's good to have a few guiding principles because you can use them to assess the situation in front of you. And for me, one is that local planning needs to be based on the local reality, the facts on the ground, and to insist on that. That's an empowering thing to do. We did that over and over for the last 7 years, and we're able to keep taking a deep breath and saying, all right, we're going to stay firm. We know what's right for Del Mar, and we're going to insist on it. We need to do everything that we can to protect and advocate for the definition of existing structures that we feel is right. Del Mar's is even more stringent than Carlsbad. So we need to be aware of these definitions of existing structures. You know, Carlsbad, it's existing as of when the local coastal program got certified or gets certified or recertified. We decided there's too much variability in certification dates. We're just going right back to 1977. So that's important. And the third important property guiding principle here is protecting property values in California, making sure that we maintain a livable state and that our homes stay livable. Yeah. Doing what it takes to be resilient. So adopting those guiding principles and watching what's going on and not being worried and fearful, but rather saying, okay, we can do something about this is really important.
Right. You know, well, again, this goes back to, we are fortunate. This is what you call having a local leader in the right place at the right time. Somebody that actually knows this. I can't even imagine what would have happened in Del Mar had they not had a Mayor Gaston on their team somewhere with her understanding of sea level rise and more so the implications of the Coastal Commission's recommendations. So a lot of times we see, you know, some people that kind of don't have a forte in a particular thing, and we end up with some crazy policies. So this is just a nice treat to have somebody in that position, because like you said, it's here at the local. where it all starts. And so we really, really appreciate you. Always glad to have you. We thank you for, reaching out, coming out actually, when we asked you to speak on it. Your knowledge is just like amazing. So we definitely appreciate that. Thank you again very much.
Well, thank you for that, Carla. I have to say, I stand on the shoulders of giants. We have real bench depth in Del Mar, and we have really concerned citizens. So that's the other thing, is rallying people to communicate, to talk, and to understand.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, we've definitely heard about the extent and the length about how this is happening in our local communities. We know that they're all different. So now it takes me to time to hear from our state up in Sacramento as what's happening there. Yeli, thank you for being here. Again, always a trooper, always willing to, extend a hand to us. CAR has been instrumental. I understand that some of the state legislators are looking to expand the authority of the Coastal Commission, expanding it. So let us know a little bit about that and what's taking place with that.
Yeah, thank you, Carla, and also Ryan as well. You are exactly correct. And this is my 16th year as a land use and environmental lobbyist for CAR. And this is the first time that anything that empowers the Coastal Commission towards housing has ever gotten through to the governor's desk. And so we're in a very awkward time right now in terms of the legislature has the appetite and has already passed 2 bills that I'll give you some information on that does increase the authority with the Coastal Commission. So the first one was AB 500 Ward. And essentially this bill gives the Coastal Commission some authority over housing and the approval of housing by giving them the authority to maintain or preserve affordable housing in the coastal zone. And so it was many years ago that legislation was passed to actually strip the Coastal Commission of any authority around housing development. So we've also fought bills in the recent past that tried to reassign that authority to the Coastal Commission, and we had won every time. However, unfortunately, AB 500 got through, and while it was moving through, we saw it had traction. So what we tried to do is get some amendment language in there, but we were not successful to do that. We were seeking to get some language that would require the Coastal Commission to approve affordable housing, if the plan does conform to what the city ordinances already are. And we also tried to get some language in there that would cap the amount of time that the Coastal Commission could consider the approval for that project, so that they would not be able to hold projects hostage forever. We were not able to get that. So basically, AB 500 Ward does now give the Coastal Commission, the language is so broadly written that it can imply, the level of authority that's given there. It says just for maintaining affordable housing, but we suspect that they're going to take that as far as they can because the language is so broadly written. Right. So that is on the governor's desk. If Smart Coast folks or individual local associations want to write a letter to the governor requesting that he veto it, please do so. The other bill, more voices is better. The other bill that went through, SB1 Atkins, this one also we saw that it was getting some traction. We tried to get some amendment language and we're not successful in doing so. And it was not just us, we had a large coalition like the Building Industry Association, housing groups, and other people involved in this. And we simply our voices were completely stifled by the legislature seeking to give more authority to the Coastal Commission. And so the way that this bill works is that it creates some new programs to address sea level rise. And in doing so, it can be seen that when you're rezoning and you have to resubmit an amendment to your local coastal program, and you needed to rezone to get housing. So these are like almost like the 2 bills are almost in conflict. That there would be the ability for the Coastal Commission then to take that rezoning and then to hold that rezoning hostage, and then also to hold projects hostage by claiming that the existing flood protections are inadequate without allowing for the consideration of improving flood systems for the accommodation of increased housing. So we were not able to get any of the provisions in that we wanted into either one of these bills, to just get some assurances that to specifically state and underscore the need for additional development in the coastal zone, since so much of California's population is in the coastal zones, and the sort of guarantee that we could continue to build housing in these regions. And so we were not able to get that. That's also on the governor's desk.
Wow.
Yeah, so there was another bill. Did you have a
That's
question
all
about that?
oh, wow.
Yeah, it's been a rough year. Yes, we had much more success in the fire section in stopping bills that would prohibit you from building in fire zones than in the coastal zone. Very, very odd, especially since we're burning. But
Right.
So nonetheless, that is also on the governor's desk. And if you would like to send a veto request, that is also an appropriate action by anyone in either group. So another bill that went through, I'm just going to mention this briefly. It extended the penalty authority that the Coastal Commission has. Currently, it's just for public access violations. And so this broadens the authority for the Coastal Commission to do administrative penalties. And it's intended, or at least the language as it was described in committees, is this was intended to just broaden that authority to help them with their backlog of violations that they feel like they don't have any traction because they can't assess penalties. And so the people aren't inclined to fix whatever violation that they have. So originally the bill had gone as far as violations under unpermitted structures and permit violations. Thankfully, that language was just recently stripped from the bill. So now it's simply regarding public access and then damage to archaeological and wetlands resources and environmentally sensitive habits. And so we're fortunate to get that peeled back at the very least, if for those who are in the middle of maybe contesting an assertion of a permit violation. So, and that also is on the governor's desk. And I wanted to just also mention the California Association of Realtors did not take a position on Senate Bill 83. We had a lot of deliberation on that, and it was finally decided that we would be neutral on the bill. And this bill essentially creates a fund. It's a revolving fund in state government for which local governments can get money to buy out coastal properties that are presumed to be at a risk of loss. And just letting you know, for any of the folks that are in Smart Coast California, there were so many differing opinions within our own organization. But that program, while it still has not been signed yet by the governor, there already is a budget allocation in the most recent set of budget bills that came out. This would be in Budget Bill, Senate Bill 155. They did get a $350 million allocation for that program. So just letting you all know that while it still hasn't even been signed by the governor, they're already funding it. So we live in
That's good
interesting
to know.
time.
Yeah, that's really, really good to know. What an update, but I'll tell you, realtors who thought that, again, sea level rise might not be impacting them. Well, now you hear it at your state level and what's really happening in the background in some of these bills. And did you say affordable housing? Did you say zoning? Like, now you're speaking my language, right? These are this is realtor language. It is impacting you in more ways than one. And so the fight is real. I'll say this plug, that's your RPAC money at work when you see Yelly rambling off these Senate bills and assembly bills or what have you. That's your RPAC money at work. People that are on the Hill, they're fighting every day to make sure we can continue to work. People can continue to enjoy their properties freely as they should be entitled to. But protecting and preserving private property rights is something that we all come together in. So again, Yelly, thank you very, very much for that. I appreciate it. You have been amazing.
I have one more update also.
Go ahead.
There was an additional document. So as all of you may know, we have been working on coastal issues for quite some time. And there's the residential adaptation document that still has not been finalized. And in the interim, I think because there's such a tremendous amount of controversy over what they had originally proposed and what other subsequent drafts that they had released. But more recently, they released a document, the Coastal Commission released a document regarding critical infrastructure. And so while housing is not seen as critical infrastructure, all the things that serve our homes are critical infrastructure. So all the utilities and roads and what have you. So we did weigh in and formally comment on that document. And for those of you who are curious as to where CAR stands on where does existing LAT come from in our estimation or interpretation of an existing structure, or at least the way I've been pushing it the last however many years, if the structure existed prior to the permit application for the seawall, that's an existing structure. So that's where we
Yeah.
hold the line. And so we reiterated our position on existing structures within our response to the Coastal Commission on infrastructure. And we also objected to them now giving themselves within that document the authority to be in charge of vehicle miles traveled impacts in the coastal zone.
Right.
Which is already, you know, it's in your general plan. It's already, and the authority has already been granted to government. We don't need them doubling up on that. And we see that that's one of the ways that they're going to try and restrict infrastructure improvements in some of the coastal communities that they want to create that managed retreat approach with. I think they're going to try and get in through the back door of, you know, managing or controlling the infrastructure and then forcing people out by denying infrastructure. So we did put comments in on that. We did.
That's a whole nother topic, you know, and I'll just say real quick, San Diego County, well, we'll see what they do, but they were taking the more restrictive number on that, which reduced development down to about 1,000 homes, from 18,000 to 1,000. And so
Wow.
that's a huge restriction. The resiliency plan that you talked about, we have some of those things that are posted on smartcoastca.org as well. If you want to sign up there, you can get updates. You can actually see some of the LCPs that are coming up and the dates. We have a quite unique system for tracking them and prioritizing them so that people know which ones they need to get out to, all that good stuff. I want to give Don a quick little follow-up if he wanted to put anything else out there.
First step is to unmute. Actually, I want to thank Ellie for her presentation. I've got a whole stack of all the bills and the status and all that. We've been watching that closely. Very informative, and thanks for the work that you do up there. I want to thank Mayor Gasserlin for the yeoman's work that she's been doing, and looking forward to working with her in the future on this. I do know that you've got some questions, Carla, and at the appropriate time, I'm prepared to answer those.
Let's see if any are for you. Actually, it looks like, hey, Charles, I see you. You got a few of them in there, but actually his was more just talking about what their policies were. He used to, what he says, he was on the staff at the CA Coastal
Hey,
probably
Carla,
at some point.
I read Charles's comments and I see a question in there.
There's several questions in there.
Hold on, I'm going through.
We can kind of boil it down to, you know, what works and what doesn't work. And that really is the crux of the debate. And I welcome what Charles has put into the Q&A, because it puts a laser focus on that. I see he talks about artificial reefs. And in fact, that's really a recent technology in terms of working on the beaches. So I'm glad he brought that up to the attention. Don had that in his presentation. And what I did not mention when I gave my remarks was the importance of retaining in a healthy way the sand on all of our beaches, you know, and recognizing that we have a system where the sand in San Diego area, San Diego County, travels all the way from Oceanside south and nourishes all our beaches. So those groins that Don talked about have to be thought about and planned as a full system from the north all the way to the south. That's a place where the planning is actually not so local, but is local to the system, the sand system that's off our shores.
Correct. And I think I'm looking through here, reading his stuff about the boaters and different things like that. I think what he actually really even points out furthermore is where we talked about that each coastal community is quite different as what works for them, you know. And that's some of the things like we talked about. What we're advocating for is that you have to look at some of these alternative methods because no two are the same, as far as even when you looked at, when he talked about in, you know, Oceanside and Del Mar, those two pictures there, no two are the same, and the effects will not be the same either. And then the resources they have available or what works in that environment are not the same. So hopefully we can continue, everybody. Again, Smart Coast CA for California, smartcoastca.org. You can get a lot of the information there. We'll follow up with everybody regarding, you know, any additional policies coming out. For you realtors out there, here's a big one. in June, the SBSA, the statewide buyer and seller, was updated to include a comment disclosure regarding sea level rise. So you want to make sure if you're not using SBSA, use it, because there's some things in there that deal with sea level rise, and especially if you are on that coast anywhere doing business there. Again, thank you guys for coming. We appreciate you guys, and we will get, I think Don's presentation is going out to all of those who are on today. Thank you very much. Anybody else, Ryan? All right.
Thank you so much. Don, I do believe, did you have some closing remarks on that as well?
Yeah, just a couple things. And I don't want to step on Carla's closer because it was very, very good. But just a couple things in regards to this. There's controversy on all of these things. But the reality is that the Coastal Commission has argued the issue of existing development as recently as the early 2000s. And they were involved in litigation against the Surf Rider organization. And they argued in that litigation that existing development did not mean January of 1977. It meant existing. And now they're trying to walk it back because it's not convenient for what they want to implement as it pertains to sea level rise. Additionally, I would point out that there has never been any case law in regards to the Coastal Commission denying a shoreline protection device for an existing home. And I think that they are going to lose if they try to do that, or they're going to put the counties or the cities on the hook to buy up those homes. One of the questions that was also in there, there was an anonymous question, and doesn't it effectively force everyone to pay for the rich people's house on the beach? And I would just point out, everybody being a taxpayer, I just point out that the rich person on the beach is being told that they have to allow their house to be destroyed. And so if we as a society take specific steps to allow private property to be destroyed, then we are all going to have to pay for that. And then just in closing, section 30500 of the Coastal Act is crystal clear. The Coastal Commission must cooperate more with the local jurisdictions. There's only been one case in the history of the Coastal Act in the state of California. And that's when the legislature passed Assembly Bill 988, giving unilateral authority for the Coastal Commission to write and adopt the LCP for the city of Malibu. That was a one-off. And so I think what we need to work together on is getting to work together so that we can address sea level rise as a very important planning issue.
Yeah, thank you for that, Don. I'll remind the realtors there when they said, you know, are we paying for whatever on, you know, for the rich people or what have you. A lot of the policies, though, we are stepping our foot in to make sure that we don't put the crack in the door. Because as soon as you put the crack in the door and allow it to happen in one place, you better believe it's coming to the rest of you real soon. So that's part of that fight, is making sure that sometimes it just doesn't happen in another place, because you will see it show up as soon as you set the precedence for it. And so we don't want to set the precedence. And again, back to what you said, holding them accountable to their own guidelines that are printed. So with that being said, thank you, everyone. You will get the presentation that Don had. And again, if anybody didn't see it, and I think they all have, but I don't know if Ryan had a page, I'll say it again, smartcoastca.org. Thank you. Bye-bye.